The night my husband passed, my children laughed on a sunny beach and I realized I didn't matter to them anymore. I'm Eleanor Brooks, a 70-year-old widow living in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. People who drive past my little white house usually think I'm just another old lady puttering around her garden, tending tomatoes and roses. But if they had seen me that night, the night everything in my life shattered, they would know my world had already collapsed long before the sun came up. Harold, my husband of 45 years, had been sitting in his favorite recliner, the one with the worn armrest and faded plaid fabric. We'd just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just chicken soup and cornbread, and I remember thinking how peaceful we were. The TV hummed softly in the background, showing some old western he'd seen a dozen times.
Outside, storm clouds were gathering, darkening the sky like a warning.
Then it happened.
A quiet gasp from Harold.
A stiffening of his fingers. A sound like someone trying to pull air through a straw. I turned to him, and in the span of a single heartbeat, the man I'd loved my entire adult life slumped sideways, his eyes wide but empty. I froze, the spoon in my hand dropping to the floor with a soft clatter.
My legs felt like wet sand.
My throat closed up. But somehow, God knows how, I forced myself to move. I grabbed his hand. It was warm for a moment. Then, frighteningly fast, it wasn't. Harold?
Harold, honey, stay with me please. My voice cracked like an old piece of wood.
I fumbled for the phone, dialing 911 with fingers that wouldn't steady. The dispatcher spoke calmly, but everything blurred. Rain hammered the roof. Wind slammed the windows. The storm outside felt like it was mocking me, laughing that this was how our story ended. While waiting for the ambulance, I pressed my forehead against Harold's, whispering anything I could think of, apologies, memories, promises. But the truth was clear. My husband, me best friend, my anchor, the man who worked 3 jobs when we were young so we could afford our first home, was gone. When the paramedics arrived and gently told me they couldn't bring him back, I felt a silence inside me so loud it roared.
My hands shook as I wiped the rain from my glasses.
My whole body trembled as I walked into the kitchen and picked up the phone again. I needed to call my son.
My only child.
The boy I had raised with everything I had, the boy his father adored. He answered on the 4th ring. Music blasted in the background. Laughter. Clinking glasses. Hey Mom. What's up? We're kinda busy here, make it quick.
Busy. On vacation in Miami. Celebrating something, judging by the noise. Mason, your father is gone. The words scraped out of my throat like broken glass.
There was a pause. A long one. Not the stunned silence of grief, no. The annoyed kind, like someone being interrupted during a movie. Mom, seriously? We're on a trip.
Can you handle it?
We'll come back later, maybe after the weekend. What?
My voice came out a whisper. Your father is dead, Mason.
In the background, I heard Tessa, me daughter-in-law, lightly and say, "Oh my God, babe, your mom is so dramatic. We just got our drinks." Then she spoke louder, directly toward the phone. "Eleanor, we planned this trip for months.
Don't dump everything on us. You, the one at home."
Dump everything on them. Harold's body was still in the next room. I felt something inside me collapse, not grief, not yet, but something smaller, meaner, the certainty that my son no longer saw me as his mother, just as a burden. I'll take care of it," I said, though I could barely breathe. "Great. Thanks, Mom. We'll send flowers or something," Mason replied, sounding relieved. Then the call ended.
Just like that.
My world ended, and they kept sipping cocktails in the Florida sun. The funeral planning swallowed me whole. I picked out Harold's coffin alone. I wrote the obituary alone. I sat with the funeral director alone, staring blankly while he explained prices I could barely afford. Not once did my phone buzz with a message saying Mason had changed his mind. Instead, I saw his social media posts, beach photos, palm trees, him and Tessa smiling like they hadn't a worry in the world. When only a handful of neighbors showed up at the quiet, rain-soaked service, I stood by Harold's casket with a numbness so thick it felt like drowning. I whispered to him, "I'm sorry. I wish your son were here. I wish he cared." The house after the funeral felt like a tomb. Every room echoed with Harold's absence. His slippers by the door. His glasses on the nightstand. His watch still ticking on the dresser, counting time he would never use. For 3 nights straight, I slept in his recliner because the bed felt too big. I cried until my chest hurt. I wondered what I had done wrong raising my child. I wondered how a heart I once held in my hands could grow so cold. And in that deep, bruising loneliness. In that silent Ohio house where grief sat like a heavy shadow. I didn't yet know that losing Harold was only the first blow. The second would come when my son finally returned home. And what he wanted wasn't to comfort me, but to take everything Harold had left behind. After the funeral haze began to thin just barely, like fog lifting off a cold Ohio field at sunrise, I found myself sitting alone at Harold's old desk, staring at the drawer he always kept locked. My palms were still shaky, but something inside me told me to open it. Not out of curiosity, but because I needed a direction, a purpose, anything to stop myself from sinking further into grief. The key was taped under his desk drawer, exactly where he'd shown me once years ago. When I unlocked the drawer, the smell of old paper and cedar drifted out his smell, faint but familiar. Inside were neatly arranged folders, labeled in Harold's handwriting: savings, land deed, emergency fund, charitable plans. Seeing those labels made my chest twist. Harold had spent decades planning for the future. Our future. Not one that ended like this. I lifted each document carefully, almost reverently. His savings were more substantial than I ever realized, not because we ever lived lavishly, but because Harold saved every extra penny he could. There was also a deed to a small piece of land outside town, a modest plot he had dreamed of turning into something meaningful one day. As I spread the papers across the desk, I remembered long conversations we'd had during our walks at sunset. Harold would talk about the kids he tutored at the community center, the ones who showed up hungry, the ones who loved books but couldn't afford them. "You know, Ellie," he would say, "if we ever get the chance, I want to help kids like that. A scholarship, a small learning space, something that lasts longer than either of us." That memory hit me like a tidal wave, and I buried my face in my hands, letting myself cry for the first time, not out of sorrow alone, but out of longing to do something he would be proud of. When I finally wiped my tears, a strange calm settled over me. It was fragile, like thin glass, but it was there. I decided I would finish the dream Harold never got to complete. The next morning, I dressed carefully as if preparing for something sacred. I buttoned my best cardigan, the light blue one Harold always liked, and slipped on my sturdy shoes. The air outside was crisp with early spring chill, and the sidewalks glistened from last night's rain. Every step toward City Hall felt like walking through a memory, quiet, heavy, but purposeful. The clerk behind the counter was a young woman with kind eyes. When I told her why I was there, to donate a large portion of Harold's savings to fund scholarships, and to contribute our land for a future community space, her eyebrows shot up. "Ma'am, are you sure?" she asked gently. "This is a significant amount." "I am," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "My husband wanted to help children and families who need it. And I want to honor him." She nodded and guided me through the forms. The process took nearly 2 hours, but I didn't mind. With every signature, every initial, I felt closer to Harold, not the memory of him dying, but the memory of him living, dreaming, hoping. When I left the building, a soft wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, it felt like Harold was walking beside me. I whispered, "I'm doing this for you, sweetheart," and allowed myself a small smile. As days passed, word traveled quickly through the neighborhood. Good news always seems to move faster than bad. People pulled me aside at the grocery store to tell me how admirable it was. One neighbor, Mrs. Hanson, even hugged me in the produce aisle and said, "Eleanor, you're an angel on earth." I laughed softly and told her I was no such thing. I was simply doing what my husband would have done. For the first time since Harold's death, I felt warmth return to my chest. I visited the local high school to ask about students who needed help. I called a small orphanage outside town to ask what supplies they lacked. I made lists in Harold's old notebook, sketching ideas for the community center we dreamed of. Every plan, every line, every phone call gave me a sense of renewal, like I was weaving purpose back into my life thread by thread. But beneath the hopeful surface, a tension remained thin and unspoken, like the faint hum of a storm gathering far away. Because I knew, deep down, Mason would eventually come home from that Miami vacation. And I knew my son. I knew his temper. I knew his greed. I knew the way Tessa whispered in his ear, always urging him to think about their future, never mine. So each night, as I sat at Harold's desk organizing papers, I felt a small shiver run down my spine. I could already imagine Mason's face turning red when he learned what I had done with the money he believed would be his inheritance. But even imagining his anger didn't make me regret the decision. Not for a second. Because for the first time since Harold's passing, I wasn't just surviving. I was living for something. For someone. For Harold's dream. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that nothing good lasts without someone trying to take it away. And I was right. 1 week later, exactly as the last forms were being processed, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming outside my house. Then loud, familiar voices, too loud, too bright, too confident. Mason and Tessa had returned from Miami. And they weren't just back to visit. They were back to claim what they believed was theirs. When I heard the car doors slam outside my house that afternoon, I felt a twinge in my chest, not excitement, not relief, something colder. A warning. The kind that sits deep in your stomach and whispers that life is about to change, and not for the better. I stood in the hallway as the front door burst open without a knock, without a pause, without the smallest courtesy you'd expect from your own flesh and blood. Mason stepped in first, sunburned, wearing expensive sunglasses pushed up on his head. Behind him came Tessa, her hair newly highlighted, arms full of designer shopping bags as if she'd just walked off a Miami boardwalk. They looked like people who'd been living in sunshine for so long they'd forgotten clouds ever existed. "Mom," Mason said loudly, pretending enthusiasm. "We're finally back. Man, Miami was unbelievable." He dropped his bags right on the carpet, Harold's carpet, the one I'd spent 40 years keeping spotless, and stretched his arms like he owned the place.
Tessa wandered deeper into my living room, spinning slowly with an amused smile.
"Wow, Eleanor, you haven't changed anything, huh?" she said, her tone dripping with something that wasn't quite admiration.
I forced myself to breathe steady.
"Your father's funeral happened while you were gone.
I thought maybe you'd come see me sooner."
Mason waved a hand as if brushing aside a minor inconvenience. "Mom, we told Yue needed time to decompress. The timing was just bad."
He grinned. "But we're here now."
Yes. They were here.
And I knew exactly why.
We hadn't even reached the kitchen before Mason asked the question I'd been expecting since the moment I heard his voice. "So, about Dad's stuff," he began casually, as if discussing the weather.
"I figured we should go over the finances."
"You know, bank accounts, land, savings." He wanted me to make sure everything is handled correctly. Correctly. According to Mason, correctly always meant in his favor. I wiped my hands on my apron and faced him fully. Your father's savings and the land deed, I've made arrangements. The room fell silent.
Mason's smile froze. Tessa's eyebrows rose slowly.
What kind of arrangements? Mason asked, though his tone already showed he feared the answer. I donated half of the savings to create a scholarship fund. The land will be used for a small community center. It was your father's dream. The rage that washed over Mason's face was instant, like a match catching gasoline. You what? He barked, stepping toward me so fast I instinctively backed up. You gave away Dad's money? His land? That's our inheritance. Tessa crossed her arms, her mouth twisted into a sour sneer. Eleanor, elderly people shouldn't make big financial decisions alone.
It's irresponsible.
You should have waited for us.
Your father wanted.
I don't care what he wanted. Mason snapped, slamming his palm down on the table so hard a glass rattled. I'm his son. That money is mine. You had no right.
His words hit me harder than the noise.
Mine. Not ours.
Not the family's. Not Mom, let us talk.
Just his. I felt my throat tighten. Your father and I earned that money together. We talked for years about helping families, helping children. Oh my God, Tessa groaned loudly.
She is delusional. A community center?
Scholarships. This is ridiculous. You're not some saint, Eleanor. You're just being dramatic because your husband died.
Her words cut through me like a blade.
But Mason, the child I raised, the boy whose scraped knees I kissed, whose school lunches I packed, was even worse. Your old mom, he said coldly. You're not thinking clearly. You need guidance. And we're going to make sure things get handled properly. Handled, in Mason's vocabulary, was just a polite way of saying controlled. That evening was the first of many confrontations. They came every single night, sometimes acting sweet, sometimes shouting, sometimes guilt-tripping, sometimes threatening. Their visits were relentless, like wolves circling an injured deer. One night, Mason leaned close and said in a soft, dangerous voice, "Mom, if you don't sign the transfer papers, we may need to move you into assisted living."
You're not safe living alone. Assisted living.
My nails dug into my palm. You don't get to decide that, I whispered. Oh, but we do, Tessa interrupted with a fake sympathetic smile. Eleanor, the city will question your mental capacity once they hear about these decisions. If we tell them you're unstable, the donations won't stand.
The land will come back to the family legally.
Legally. Another word they twisted for their own gain. The pressure grew heavier each day. They followed me around the house. They rifled through my documents, muttering about fixing the mess. I tried hiding the donation papers, but Mason somehow found them anyway. Had always been snoopy, even as a child.
One night, when the storm outside echoed the one in my home, Tessa changed tactics.
She plastered on a gentle smile and brought me a warm glass of milk. Drink this, Eleanor, she said softly. It'll help you relax. You're overwhelmed, and you need rest. I was exhausted physically, emotionally, spiritually. I didn't suspect anything. I drank it. It took less than a day for the effects to begin. At first it was just a dull headache, then moments of confusion walking into rooms and forgetting why, losing my train of thought mid-sentence, misplacing items I'd never misplaced in 40 years. I found myself waking up in strange places: the kitchen chair, the guest room couch, with no memory of how I got there.
Then came the day I forgot Harold's birthday.
The date we celebrated every year.
The number etched into my heart.
I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking as I tried to grasp the memory that wouldn't come. It felt like someone had reached into my mind and turned off a light switch. And then the truth began to dawn on me, slowly but unmistakably. That milk. That fake kindness.
The sudden confusion.
Something was wrong. Deeply, horribly wrong. Mason and Tessa watched me decline with barely hidden satisfaction. They whispered behind my back. They started telling neighbors, "Mom has been acting strange, early dementia maybe," sowing seeds to make my legal decisions appear invalid. And one evening when I overheard them whispering by the kitchen doorway, I finally heard the truth slip out, cold and sharp. "We'll up her dosage tomorrow," Tessa murmured. "The more confused she is, the easier it'll be to get her signature." My heart dropped.
A chill ran down my spine. My skin prickled in terror.
They weren't just trying to manipulate me. They were trying to erase me. Bit by bit. Memory by memory. Until I became nothing but a confused shell. Easy to control, easy to silence, easy to rob. I went to bed that night trembling, clutching Harold's old sweater like a lifeline. My thoughts jumbled, flickering like a broken bulb, but one thing remained crystal clear. If I didn't find help soon,
my own child, the baby I once rocked to sleep,
was going to destroy me. And the most frightening part? No one knew what was happening behind my closed doors. No one. Except the neighbor who would soon save my life. The morning I truly realized I wasn't safe in my own home started like any other gray, cold, Ohio quiet, yet something felt different. The fog in my head was thicker, as if someone had stuffed cotton between my thoughts. I shuffled to the kitchen, gripping the wall for balance, and stared at the refrigerator door without remembering why I'd walked there.
I whispered to myself, "Harold, I can think what is happening to me."
But my voice sounded hollow, like it came from somewhere far away. That was when I heard a gentle knock at the back door. It was Lily Carter, my young neighbor, the girl I'd come to think of almost like family, though we weren't related by blood. She lived alone in a tiny rental house next to mine, piecing together a life after losing her parents in a car accident when she was a child. Maybe that was why she often checked on me. Maybe she saw something of herself in my loneliness.
"Miss Eleanor," she called softly.
"I saw your kitchen light on early.
Everything okay?"
I tried to answer, but my tongue felt heavy. Instead of words, what came out was a weak trembling, "Lily, I don't feel right." Her face shifted instantly from polite concern to sharp alarm. She stepped inside without waiting, helped me sit at the table, and held my wrist with both hands as if she feared I might disappear. "Tell me what's wrong," she urged. I tried. I really did. But the words in my mind were scattered like leaves in a storm.
"Still," I managed to mumble, "Mason, Tessa, milk strange."
Lily leaned closer, eyebrows furrowing. "Did they give you something?
Did you take anything new?"
I pointed at the half-full glass of milk left on the counter from the night before, the glass Tessa had handed me, with that rehearsed softness, with that sweet, poisonous voice. Lily studied it with narrowed eyes. She sniffed the rim, then looked at me again. "Has Tessa been bringing you this every night?" she asked slowly. I nodded. Her lips tightened into a thin, worried line. She didn't say another word right then, but something in her expression told me she already suspected what I had not yet dared to believe. Later that afternoon, Lily stayed longer than usual. It wasn't her scheduled break from work, she had simply walked over again, as if something inside her kept tugging her back to my house. I tried to talk to her more clearly, but my memories kept slipping away, like water through cupped hands. She noticed. She noticed everything. She noticed the trembling in my fingers. She noticed the way I forgot my sentence halfway. She noticed how my eyes darted around, panicked, confused. She noticed the bruises on my arm where Mason had grabbed me too tightly the night before. And she noticed the shredded papers on my desk, documents Mason had rifled through while sneering about fixing your mistakes, Mom. Lily had always been bright, observant, a young woman who lived on instinct sharpened by hardship. And now those instincts locked onto me like a lifeline. "Miss Eleanor," she said quietly as she helped me lie down, "something's going on here. Something you're not telling me. And I think you're scared to say it." My throat tightened. My eyes welled. I wasn't sure if the tears came from fear or relief, fear of my reality, relief that someone finally saw it. So I whispered, "Lily, I think they're trying to make me forget." Her jaw clenched. "Who?" she asked, though I knew she already knew the answer.
"Mason and Tessa," I cried softly.
"They want the money.
They want me gone.
They want me to lose myself." Lily sat perfectly still for a long moment. Then she stood abruptly and scanned the room, every corner, every shelf, the fridge, the trash, the counter. She wasn't looking at the house, she was searching for the truth. She opened the refrigerator and found the carton of milk Tessa had used. She turned it in her hands, studying it as if it held the final piece of a puzzle. "This doesn't smell right," she muttered.
"It smells chemical."
My heart thudded painfully in my chest.
"Lily, am I dying?"
I whispered. She spun around so fast her hair whipped across her cheek.
"No. You are not dying. Not on my watch."
Her voice was fierce, protective, like a daughter defending her mother. It startled me, but it also warmed something deep in my heart, something I hadn't felt in months. She knelt beside my chair and held my hand with both of hers. "Listen to me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion.
"I lost my parents young. I know what it feels like to be alone and helpless.
I will not let that happen to you. I will not let anyone hurt you."
I couldn't stop the tears.
She squeezed my hand tighter. "But I need to know everything. Every detail. What they said, what they gave you, how many times, what you felt, all of it." I tried to recount the stormy, shaky memories, the pressure, the threats, the nights waking up disoriented. With each word, her expression darkened. "This is poison," she whispered. "They're drugging you." That was the first time I heard the truth spoken aloud by another person. And hearing it made my whole body collapse into sobs.
I cried into Lily's shoulder like a child.
She held me without judgment. But when I finally lifted my head, she wasn't crying. Her face had hardened with determination. "We're going to the hospital," she said. "Right now." Getting me into a taxi was a struggle. My legs barely worked, and my mind buzzed with static. Lily spoke urgently to the driver, who must have sensed something was terribly wrong, because he sped through town faster than any cab I'd ever been in. At the emergency room, doctors pushed me through a whirlwind of tests, blood work, cognitive checks, toxin screens. Nurses helped me lie on the hospital bed while bright lights flickered above me like stars. The doctor returned hours later with a heavy expression.
"Mrs.
Brooks," he said carefully, "you have toxic levels of cognitive impairing substances in your blood.
Potent ones.
The kind used for severe dementia patients or, in rare cases, to induce memory failure." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "You were being poisoned." Lily's hand tightened around mine. I stared at the doctor, numb, the room spinning. Who would do that to me? He looked at Lily, then back at me. "We will notify authorities. But whoever gave you those substances, they were trying to destabilize your mind long-term." My chest constricted with terror. I felt as if I were falling and no one could catch me. But Lily leaned in close, tears in her eyes but fire in her voice. "They won't touch you again," she whispered. I promise.
ELL protect you.
And for the first time in months, maybe years, I believed someone. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days while the toxins drained from my body. My memory flickered like a damaged lantern, but moments of clarity began returning. I remembered Harold's voice. I remembered my donations.
I remembered my purpose.
I remembered Mason's threats. When I was discharged, Lily wheeled me outside under the cool evening sky. She took a deep breath and said, "You're coming home with me tonight.
Just until you're fully steady." But I shook my head.
"No," I said, rising slowly.
"I'm going home."
She looked horrified. "Miss Eleanor, what if they come back? What if they try to finish what they started?" I looked her straight in the eyes and felt something inside me click into place, something fierce, something unbroken. "That's why I need to go home," I said. "Because they think I'm weak. But I'm not. Not anymore. And with you beside me, I'm not afraid." Lily took a long breath, then nodded. "Okay. Then I'm staying with you." And she did. That night, as we stepped into my quiet house, me battlefield, my prison, my home, I felt the shadows shift around us. The danger hadn't passed.
The storm wasn't over.
But I wasn't alone anymore. And that changed everything. When Lily and I returned to my house after the hospital, the sun had already dipped behind the Ohio treeline, turning the sky a bruised shade of purple. The shadows around my porch felt heavier than before, as if the house itself remembered the danger lurking inside its walls.
I hesitated on the threshold, one hand gripping the doorframe.
"You okay?" Lily whispered beside me.
I inhaled shakily.
"I'm trying to be." She placed a steadying hand on my back. "We'll handle this together." Inside, the house was eerily silent. My living room still held the faint scent of the lavender candle I'd lit days earlier, before everything unraveled. The cushions remained dented where Mason had sat, shouting at me. My kitchen still had the faint smear on the counter, where Tessa had spilled her comforting glass of milk. Every detail stabbed at my memory. Lily noticed the tension in my shoulders. "Miss Eleanor," she murmured, "their plans falling apart now."
"You getting better?"
"They won't expect that." But that truth didn't comfort me. It scared me. People like Mason and Tessa didn't stop when things got difficult, they pushed harder. That night, while Lily made us tea, I sat in Harold's recliner and tried to gather my thoughts. The fog in my head had lessened since the hospital detox, but it still rose unexpectedly in waves. I clung to the warm mug and closed my eyes, listening to the house creak around me like an old ship in turbulent water. Suddenly, Lily stepped into the room with her phone held out.
"Miss Eleanor, look at this."
On her screen was a string of social media posts. Mason and Tessa were still in Ohio, posing with a realtor, smiling brightly as if nothing were wrong. The caption said, "Back home to deal with family property.
Big changes coming."
My heart dropped. They're planning something. Lily's voice turned low and cold. "They're planning to claim everything you have, and they think you're too confused to stop them." I felt sick.
I set my mug down, shaking.
"We need proof, Lily. Hard proof. Or the police won't believe me." Lily nodded slowly. "We're going to gather evidence, real evidence they can't deny." She pulled a small box from her backpack and opened it to reveal several tiny devices, button-sized audio recorders, motion sensors, 2 small cameras no bigger than my thumb. She had ordered them while I was still in the hospital.
I stared at her. "Lily, where did you?"
She shrugged.
"Amazon."
"You'd be surprised what the internet sells for $20. Despite everything, I let out a small, trembling laugh. But the humor evaporated quickly. Because now we were planning to trap my own son. We spent the next 2 hours planting the devices. Lily worked quickly and quietly, moving as if she were born for this kind of stealth, eyes sharp, movements smooth. She hid one camera inside the living room lamp, another behind a book on Harold's shelf. She placed a recorder inside the sugar jar, a hiding spot I would never have thought of, one under the kitchen table, one inside a decorative bowl on the mantel. If they come back, Lily said, tightening the last screw, we'll catch every word. I swallowed hard. What if they don't say anything incriminating? Oh, Lily replied, her voice turning grim, they will. People like them always talk when they think no one's listening. It didn't take long. 3 days later, while Lily and I pretended to be out at the grocery store, the motion sensor pinged her phone. She grabbed my hand. They're in the house. We listened from her car across the street, my heart pounding so violently I felt every thud in my throat. Mason's voice came through first, harsh, impatient. Where are the papers? Mom's been hiding crap again. Tessa hissed, they have to be somewhere. The land deed didn't just vanish. I swear, if she gave another cent away. Relax, Mason snapped. Once we push the dementia claim with her doctor, everything she signed becomes invalid. Legally, it'll all revert to us. Then came the sentence that made my entire body go cold. If she doesn't get confused enough, Tessa whispered, we still have more of that stuff. We just need to slip it into something she eats. Or we wait until she falls or something. She's old. Accidents happen. My hand flew to my mouth. I trembled so violently Lily had to grip my shoulders to steady me. Tessa continued, voice low and venomous. Honestly, at this point maybe we should consider something stronger. If she ends up in a nursing home, everything will go faster. Mason laughed. He actually laughed. Exactly. Then we sign what we need to, and we're out. Easy. Lily's jaw clenched so tight I could hear her teeth grind. That's enough, she said, voice shaking with fury. She tapped the screen, saving every second of audio. But Mason wasn't done. And if she starts remembering too much, he added casually, we'll handle it. One way or another. My stomach churned. This wasn't just greed. This wasn't impatience. This was malicious intent. Against May's mother. Lily put her phone down and turned to me slowly. We have them. We have everything we need. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened too much for words. Tears blurred my vision, and Lily gently wiped them away. We're going to the police tomorrow morning, she said. We'll bring every device, every file. They can't talk their way out of this anymore. I nodded, my breath shaky. Lily, what could I have done without you? She squeezed my hand. I promised I'd protect you. And I meant it. But the story didn't end that night. Because darkness rarely surrenders without a fight. And Mason and Tessa. They weren't done with me yet. The next evening, while Lily stayed with me and helped sort the audio files, something strange happened. Around midnight, we heard footsteps outside, soft, cautious, creeping along the gravel of my driveway. Lily stiffened. Stay here, she whispered. But I couldn't stay still. Fear gnawed at my heart. I shuffled to the window, peeking out just enough to see shapes moving in the dark, 2 figures. One tall, one slender. My blood froze. Mason. And Tessa. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming to finish what they'd started. Before I could warn Lily, the smell hit sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Gasoline. Lily lunged toward me and pulled me back. They're trying to set the house on fire. Miss Eleanor, we need to leave now. Panic seized my chest as flames flickered near the porch.
Smoke crept under the door in thin grey snakes.
Lily threw open the window, helped me climb out, and shoved me toward the backyard as the first flames began crawling up the siding like hungry hands. We ran well. Lily ran and half-carried May across the yard, coughing, gasping, eyes watering. Behind us, my house, the place Harold and I built our life, crackled with rising fire. The sirens didn't arrive for 10 long, agonizing minutes. When firefighters finally dragged us away and police cars boxed in the burning home, I looked up through streaming eyes just in time to see officers tackling Mason and Tessa as they tried to flee into the darkness. Their hands were stained with gasoline. Their clothes reeked of smoke. Their eyes were wild with panic. And for the first time, I saw something in Mason's face I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Because he realized the world was finally seeing who he truly was. Hours later, as firefighters battled the flames that ate my memories, Lily stood beside me at the ambulance, her arm wrapped around my shoulders.
"Miss Eleanor," she said softly, "I know your house is gone.
But you're alive. And they're going to pay for this." Her voice held no doubt. She was right. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the toxins in my blood, the arson attempt, it was all undeniable. But as the last of my home collapsed into smoking rubble, I whispered brokenly, "Harold, I'm sorry, I tried to keep our life safe." Lily squeezed me tighter. "You did more than survive. You fought.
And now justice will come."
As the fire finally died and the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, I breathed shakily, my chest aching but alive. Alive because of Lily. Alive because I didn't give up. Alive because truth had finally begun to surface. But I knew the battle wasn't finished. The courtroom was waiting. And so was justice. The fire that destroyed my house burned long into the night, but the aftermath burned even longer inside me. In the days that followed, I stayed temporarily in a small guest room at the hospital while police finalized their reports and investigators sifted through the ashes of what used to be my home. I kept replaying the image of flames swallowing Harold's chair, our photo albums, the quilt we made together in our 30s.
Every memory felt like a small funeral.
But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Lily visited every morning and every night, always with warm coffee and that steady, determined look in her eyes, the look that told me she didn't pity me. She stood with me. "You will get justice," she said every time she walked through the door. "I promise." And she was right. The trial began 2 months later, after my body had fully flushed out the drugs Mason and Tessa had forced on me. My memory, though scarred, had sharpened again, returning to me piece by piece like puzzle fragments snapping into place. The prosecutors prepared meticulously, building the case brick by brick, hospital toxicology reports, forensic arson evidence, bank statements showing Mason's attempted forgeries, the audio of their confession inside my house, and most damning of all, the recordings of the arson attempt itself, pulled from a distant street camera. When I walked into the courtroom on the first day, everything fell silent. The judge, a woman with sharp glasses and steel-gray hair, studied me with a solemn kind of respect. Reporters sat gathered in the back row. A few neighbors, people who used to wave politely but never really knew, sat with hands over their mouths, whispering. But what struck me most was seeing my son. Mason stood between 2 guards, his wrists cuffed, his expression a mask of anger and fear. He looked smaller somehow, not in height, but in spirit. A grown man who had gambled everything on the belief that no one would ever stop him.
And then there was Tessa.
Her hair was disheveled, her mascara smeared. She refused to look at me. When they were asked to enter their pleas, their voices trembled. "Not guilty." The lie echoed through the courtroom like a stone dropped into a still lake. The prosecution began by presenting the recordings Lily and I had collected. My heart pounded as the speakers filled the courtroom with my son's voice. She'll be confused enough eventually. Legally, it'll all revert to us. We can always push her into assisted living. If she starts remembering too much, we'll handle it. Each sentence felt like a cut, each word a wound. The jury's faces shifted from shock to disgust, and I saw some of them glance at me with horrified sympathy. Next came the toxicology reports. Then the arson evidence. Then the financial fraud documents Mason had tried to falsify. Every piece clicked into the next like a grotesque jigsaw puzzle, forming a picture of greed and cruelty I had never wanted to see. When the prosecutor finally turned toward me, she nodded gently. "Mrs. Brooks, your testimony." I stood slowly, leaning on my cane, and walked to the witness stand with Lily's supportive glance giving me courage. The courtroom quieted so deeply I could hear the soft hum of the ceiling lights. I took a breath, slow, steady, trembling, and began. "I'm not here today because my son disappointed me," I said. "I'm here because he tried to destroy me."
A murmur rippled through the room.
For months, I felt my mind slipping away. I couldn't remember simple things. I couldn't think straight. I blamed age. I blamed grief.
I blamed myself. My voice cracked.
But it wasn't age. And it wasn't grief. I turned my gaze toward Mason, who looked down at the table. "It was you," I whispered. People shifted in their seats.
I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us all.
"You tried to poison me. You tried to take everything your father and I worked for. You tried to burn down my home with me inside it.
You chose greed over love, money over blood, selfishness over humanity."
A tear slipped down my cheek, but I didn't hide it. I came here today not as a victim, but as someone who survived. I survived because of a young woman who showed me more kindness than my own child did. I survived because the truth refused to stay hidden. And I survived because I realized something that took me 70 years to understand.
I placed a hand over my heart.
Family isn't just blood. Family is who stays when the world falls apart. Lily bowed her head in quiet emotion. The judge cleared her throat gently. "Thank you, Mrs.
Brooks." When I stepped down from the stand, my knees trembled, but Lily caught my arm, steady and unshakable.
"You were brilliant," she whispered.
"No," I said softly.
"I was honest." The defense tried everything. They claimed I was unstable, confused, grieving. They said the recordings were misconstrued, the toxins accidental, the arson scene circumstantial. They even brought in a private doctor who tried to claim I had early cognitive slippage. But then the prosecutor played one last recording, the audio of Mason and Tessa whispering about using stronger methods and staging an accident. It broke whatever resistance the jury had left. I watched their faces harden one by one until I knew the verdict long before it was spoken. On the final day, Mason and Tessa stood for sentencing. The judge spoke with a voice that carried both compassion and anger.
"Mr. Brooks, Mrs.
Brooks," she said, addressing them with formal coldness, "your crimes are severe. You exploited an elderly woman, attempted financial fraud, administered harmful substances with intent to incapacitate, and committed arson with potential loss of life." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "This court sentences you both to 15 years in state prison." Tessa collapsed into sobs. Mason stiffened, his jaw clenched, his pride collapsing like wet paper. As they were handcuffed and led away, Mason finally lifted his eyes to mine. For a moment, just one, I thought I saw the little boy he once was, the boy who used to hug my waist when scared of thunderstorms. But the moment passed. That boy was long gone. After the sentencing, reporters gathered outside. I ignored them. Lily guided me past the flashing cameras, past the courthouse steps, into the cool air of the afternoon. When we reached the parking lot, I stopped and touched her hand.
You saved my life, I said.
She shook her head.
No, Miss Eleanor.
You fought just as hard as I did. I smiled faintly.
Then we saved it together.
The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of healing and rebuilding. Insurance covered part of the fire damage, but I refused to rebuild my old home.
Too many memories, good and bad, were trapped under the ashes.
Instead, Lily and I moved into a modest 2-bedroom cottage on the outskirts of town. It wasn't big, but it was warm, sunlit, peaceful.
We painted the walls soft cream.
We filled the kitchen with fresh herbs. We hung a photo of Harold above the mantel, the one where he was smiling in his garden hat, dirt on his cheeks.
And slowly, life found a gentler rhythm again. We restarted Harold's dream.
Scholarships for underprivileged students. Food drives for families in need. Small book donations to local shelters. A plan to turn the donated land into a community reading space. Children began calling me Miss Ellie. Neighbors brought pies and blankets.
Lily laughed more.
I cried less. And one quiet evening, as the sun set behind the cottage, painting the sky gold, Lily and I sat on the porch steps with matching mugs of tea. Miss Eleanor, she said softly, do you think we're a family now? I reached over and squeezed her hand. We always were, I whispered. We just didn't know it yet. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since Harold died, my heart felt full in a way grief had tried so hard to steal. The past had been cruel. But the future felt like something Harold would smile at. Because love had returned to my life not through blood, but through choice, through kindness, through Lily, daughter, in every way that mattered. And as the last light of evening flickered over us, I closed my eyes and whispered into the gentle Ohio breeze. Justice was served, Harold.
And I am not alone anymore.